You know, when we sent out the flyer for today's event, we weren't sure how big of a excuse me, how big of a turnout we would get when the topic is tax increment financing. People would go, what in the hooey is that? And unfortunately, that's the way most people and communities think of urban renewal. When they hear those three words, tax increment financing, they get confused because there was a word tax in there. And they go, well, I don't want to pay for anything that adds another tax to my monthly expenses. But in fact, tax increment financing is a very positive financial resource tool. And today we're going to give you what most journalists call the fundamentals in the first paragraph. The who, the what, the when, the where, the why, and the how. Who actually uses tax increment financing? What is it? Where has it been used in the past? What have been the results? Why have they used it? And how does it actually work? So the blue cards on your tables are our question cards. We have a very distinguished panel here that has many, many years of experience in working with municipalities throughout our region on the implementation of tax increment financing, or you may have heard of urban renewal. They're synonymous, they're exchangeable, but they mean the same thing. And again, if you do have tax increment financing or urban renewal on your property tax statements, it's not an additional tax. What it is a resource to take areas that are blighted or underutilized and allows those projects to go forward. And in today's environment, many, many projects are mothballed just because of the costs associated with just getting started. So without having that resource of urban renewal, they never get off the ground. And we have a lot of success stories we're going to share with you today in Wilsonville and elsewhere. I'd like to thank our sponsors today. Level 1, Seth Henderson. Where are you? Raise your hand, Seth. And Seth today is going to be your moderator because he has a great understanding of urban renewal. He was the developer behind trying to get the landfill project off the ground, utilizing urban renewal. And out of hundreds of entities that were sent requests for interest on the renovation of the existing Clackamas County Courthouse, after dozens of testimony of which the Oregon City Business Alliance participated in, Seth was the only proposal that was submitted, so we're thankful that he's still hanging in there. And there were several hundred requests asked for from companies that might have an interest in that. His was the only proposal. And at that hearing up at the Clackamas County Public Facilities, they decided to go forward with serious negotiation with Seth's company, Level 1. So we're very pleased to have him on our board at the Oregon City Business Alliance as well. And Carpenter Media, which acquired Pamphlet Media, is also our other sponsor. I'd like to introduce our elected officials that we have here today. Mike Mitchell, where are you? There you are, you're hiding over there. Mary Baumgartner, President of the Westland City Commission. Carol Brick, Counselor with Westland. Tessa Donnell with the Water Environmental Service, no, not the Clackamas River Water. Excuse me, I stand corrected. And I don't know if Steve Hawes with Clackamas Fire is here yet, but he's also registered. Okay, I think that covers everything that I need to say. So that being said, Seth, I'm going to turn it over to you to do the introduction of our panelists. And then he'll be taking your questions, and then I'll be doing the closing comments. I also want to give a yell out to the staff here at the Abernathy Center for what an amazing buffet. When I saw those roasted vegetables, I said, I'm going there first. I'm going to pile my plate full of that before I get to everything else. So thank you, Abernathy Center staff.
So Matthew, important question. How do we switch slides?
I'm second, so who's after me?
Oh, I'm last. I'm last. see. We'll test this out here. Perfect. All right. So as Kent mentioned, my name's Seth Henderson, and I am on the OCBA board. I am also a developer, as he also mentioned. Full disclosure, I've done projects with Urban Renewal. When we sat down to talk about what specific forums we were going to do this year as OCBA, one of the items that came up was, hey, let's do something on urban renewal. And in terms of somebody with experience that could take it on, I thought it would be easy. Here's an economic tool, uncontroversial. Yeah, no problem at all. I'll raise my hand, put together a panel, and get it going. So anybody here heard of House Bill 3499? That was going to require votes for every urban renewal modification or approval? Or Commissioner Mitchell, in regards to people enjoying keeping their vote, we could say that's an issue as well, right? So we've put together an outstanding panel today, and when we started talking about what did we want to cover, we wanted to keep today very positive. So we're talking about success stories. And we're going to have each individual introduce themselves, but we're going to do quick intro. We're going to talk about tax increment financing, what it is. So it's pretty simplistic in definition. When you get into application, it's a little bit more convoluted. And then we're going to have each one of them talk about, a project they've worked on using public funds that has gone very well. Then we've got a couple of brief questions, and then we'll look to you. So what questions do you have? We're hoping to also address some lessons learned as we go through this. So if there's anybody that at some point gets to be on a commission, a board, a council that's involved with urban renewal, that you'll have some lessons learned to apply. So with that, Elaine, why don't you go ahead first? You got a mic right in front of you?
It's on? Good afternoon. I'm Elaine Howard. I'm a consultant who works on urban renewal tax increment financing all across Oregon and have recently started working on projects in the state of Washington. I've been doing this for about 20 years, and I like to say that I work from Astoria to Pendleton to Burns to Brookings and everywhere in between. So I have a lot of experience and a lot of tales to tell, I guess.
Are we just doing who we are and who we work for?
Yeah, pretty much who you are, what position you've got, and we're keeping this relatively brief before we dive in.
Good afternoon. My name is Matt Lorenzen, and I'm the Economic Development Manager for the City of Wilsonville. Before Wilsonville, I worked for the City of Estacada for nearly 6 years, so bring both a suburban and rural perspective to the topic of urban renewal tax increment finance. Thanks.
Thanks. My name is Will Norris. I'm the Urban Renewal Administrator for the City of Hood River. Before that, I was the Finance Director going back to 2016, where urban renewal was part of my portfolio. And for the past 2 years, I've been in this newly created, dedicated urban renewal position, where the city decided to really lean into our successes and put more time and attention to using urban renewal.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Sid Sin, the Urban Renewal and Economic Development Manager for the City of Tualatin. I've had the pleasure of working in local government for about 28 years, doing land use planning and primarily focusing on urban renewal and economic developments. Worked for the City of Eugene, Oregon City. In the last 25 years, I've spent with the City of Lake Oswego. So. And I'm going to prime one of my slides. I'm excited to talk about Tualatin 2.0.
Great, thank you for that. Just a little additional background. I do not have blackmail material on any of these individuals. Elaine, I actually ran into. Matt was kind enough to ask my partner Jenny Jenkins and I to be part of the task force for the town center. And of course, Elaine was there, and then we responded to an RFP from the Dalles, and of course, Elaine was there. So I refer to her as kind of the urban renewal guru of the state. So if you have any questions, as long as they are relatively mild and kind, she is the person to talk to. Matt, we're working on a project right now in the town center. His efforts have been tremendous. We're going to talk a bit about Wilsonville and their success with urban renewal and a recent vote that was frustrating. But he is tremendous at what he does. Will was actually recommended to me. Oregon City, West Lynn, Gladstone, Milwaukee, you all have adjacency to rivers. What they've done at Hood River is really impressive with urban renewal, and it might be applicable to some people here and plans they might have in the future. And then Sid and I actually worked on a project 10 years ago, the Windward in Lake Oswego, that used urban renewal funds to do an additional level of public parking under that building. So we've got some history, all positive, right? Okay, let's dive into tax increment financing. So here's the really exciting point at part of this presentation, which is the definition of what it is. And the most appropriate individual to talk about that is, of course, Elaine.
So this is the technical stuff that no one ever likes to remember. But when a tax increment area is formed, the county assessor will establish what's called a frozen base assessed value of that area. That includes all personal property, utility property, real property within that area. That's shown by the blue across the bottom. All of the taxing districts will continue getting their taxes off of the value of the area as it was when it was established. You can see the gold indicates the increased values over time. The gold in the little hatch area is that 3% that property values go up every year, unless we're in a great recession, like we were in 2008. But typically, I think this one, is it still okay? But typically, our property values go up by 3% each year. That is the real foregone revenue by all of those taxing districts. That's the amount that they do not get over the lifetime of an urban renewal area, as that money is invested into the community to do projects and programs that will hopefully stimulate increased activity within that area, which is shown by the other gold. That other gold represents other investments that happen within the tax increment area, and all of those taxes go to the Urban Renewal Agency to complete projects within the area. A lot of times cities say to me or call me and they say, somebody wants to do investments and it doesn't increase the assessed value directly, so we don't want to do it. And I try to explain to them, all investments do not have to directly increase your assessed value. There are many investments that you can make in your community increase assessed value because maybe you improved a park or a location or a theater that makes more people want to develop in your community and makes your community more livable, and that then increases those assessed values. When urban renewal terminates after it reaches its maximum indebtedness, all of that property goes back onto the property tax rolls, and all of your different taxing districts receive their pro rata share of that increase in assessed value. So that's the technical description of urban renewal. I usually follow that up with a softer description, and I think we're getting to that.
Yeah, so Elaine, a couple really quick questions for you before you pass that mic on. Does urban renewal increase the property taxes?
Urban renewal, any new urban renewal district will not increase property taxes. There are some very small number of urban renewal districts that were formed back in the 1990s they might have an impact on property taxes, but any new district or any district that does a substantial amendment to their plan does not increase personal property taxes. The impacts of urban renewal are on the adjacent taxing jurisdictions, so city, county, soil and water conservation district, those other districts.
What about the school districts?
Such a softball question. School districts in Oregon are funded through the state school fund. The state school fund is made up of many different funding sources, including property tax revenues. An urban renewal area in Oregon City or in Portland or in Pendleton does not mean that the funds that go to their local schools are any less. The legislature establishes a per pupil ratio for all of students in Oregon that gets adjusted according to different formulas. But urban renewal does not directly impact any school district. It impacts the state school fund. The legislature has the ability to backfill those monies to the state school fund to ensure that all school districts get that per pupil amount. That is the amount that's established by the legislature. That works for your local schools and your education school district. And community colleges have a similar statewide funding source.
Perfect. Okay. So, Matt, Will, Sid, you get pulled aside in a grocery store and somebody says, I want to talk to you about urban renewal. And you have to explain to them what it is based on what Elaine just said, layman's terms, urban renewal, what it is to you. Go.
The grocery store, huh?
Yeah.
So I would probably reference something that's fresh in people's minds. I think many of us have seen a recent headline, at least if you read the Portland Business Journal or similar, the Oregonian covered it as well, I think. There's been talk of this so-called Portland doom loop. Raise your hand if you've heard about that. The concept is basic, and it is essentially a pattern of, or a cycle of disinvestment within a certain geographic area. In this case, they were talking about downtown Portland. But that same pattern can exist really in a community or a district within a community. But oftentimes, for any number of reasons, this pattern of disinvestment can occur. And oftentimes when an area becomes blighted or struggling, that doesn't signal investors to bring more money into that community or into that area. Oftentimes the opposite is true, and you see further disinvestment and lack of confidence in that area, less vibrancy, less activity, and so the cycle goes. If I were in a grocery store and I were trying to explain urban renewal, I would say this is an opportunity for government to be used as a force of good, for taxing districts to combine forces and together invest in an area to reverse that doom loop or that cycle of disinvestment, to bring tax-based growth, reinvest that in the area on a continual basis to, instead of having a doom loop, a sort of virtuous cycle of investment and vibrancy and indeed renewal within a certain area. How's that?
Solid. Will.
Okay.
So I'd say it's first an economic development tool, and like any other tool, it depends how well you use it and how effective it is. Looking at that graph over there, the amount of the gold that comes from that new development versus just that 3%, I think that's where comes in effective use of urban renewal versus, unplanned or haphazard. So I think having a plan and having an understanding of what is the potential that you're trying to unlock is critical. And that's where urban renewal is a tool to harness that potential, bring it forward, borrow against future value, and make investments that are needed today to catalyze what wouldn't have happened otherwise. And so that's one way that it can really be a way for cities to, usually they just work in the realm of regulation. This is a way that we can think entrepreneurially and catalyze development with not just sticks, but also with carrots.
So I feel like I'm going to be the more touchy-feely person on this panel, but I I like to start off with urban renewal as saying it's about placemaking. I mean, it's about creating memorable spaces and places in a community where people remember that place. When people come into a community or visitors come in, they want to take that person to that location. A lot of that is created through urban renewal, Balloon Plaza Park, other areas in the metro area. The other thing is, I'd always like to ask people, think of a place where you like, something that's experiential. And to me, that's what urban renewal is about, because if you can start with that as kind of the foundation, kind of the common thread that everybody can identify as a memorable place, and then transition that into blossoming into a district area-wide area, then to me, that's kind of urban renewal, and that's what it's supposed to do. And bottom line is, it's a quality of life tool to me. It affects everyone in the community. It's not just a localized area, but quality of life overall.
Very soft. I like it. All right, so we now jump into the exciting part, which is the specific stories and projects that each of you have worked on that you consider to be a success. And we're going to start today with Matt. And just for each of you, let me know when you want the slide to be advanced.
Deal. Is it okay if I stand?
You can stand, you can walk, yeah,
Okay.
whatever makes you happy. Just don't leave.
Well, I got here late. Can I leave early? I'm going to stand. In a former life, I was a high school teacher. This is kind of the way I work. I wave my hands and I make my points in that fashion, so I hope that's all right. We'll talk about Wilsonville, but first I want to talk about Estacada. Some of the most tactical and I think impactful work that I've done through TIF was in this small town, and I like to think that the effects are still being felt today. And it's because of the tool, not because of me necessarily. But let's take a look at a case study. Sometimes urban renewal projects can be millions of dollars. In this case, we're talking about not millions of dollars, but still important for a community. So this little building sits at the corner of 4th and Main in Estacada. And if you peek right back here at this other building, anyone know what building that is if you're familiar with Estacada? So that's City Hall. Okay, so adjacent to City Hall, a shared parking lot really, you had a building in decay with no indication that that was going to change anytime soon. It used to be a motorsports shop where they serviced and sold motorsports parts and did that sort of thing. And that was fine, but it lived its life, and the business decided to close, and it sat in this state for several years. Trying to remember what I have upcoming after this. Go ahead and advance the slide, if you will. Okay. I did my job and tried to provide context. So yeah, City Hall is here. This is Broadway, which really functions like Main Street in Estacada. And this is Main Street, which is kind of like a secondary Main Street, both commercial sort of thoroughfares. And that arrow, of course, indicates where the building is located. So ever since I took the job, this building just kind of like stared at me every day when I would walk into the office. And talked to the property owner. They were interested in potentially selling, but felt that the property was worth thus and such, and no one was willing to bring that to the table. They were willing to lease it, but they didn't have liquid capital available to bring the building up to a condition where it would be attractive to a business to move into. And as you know, if you're a business owner, especially a new business owner, you also don't have tons of liquid capital at your fingertips to put into a space, especially when you're only going to be leasing it, right? You're going to be investing in someone else's property at that point. So it was really kind of stuck in this state of purgatory where there was a lack of capital to really bring this building up to a condition that could serve the community. Let's go ahead and see what I have next. So here's what it became. And I'll tell you where we go from no one offering to buy the building, no one willing to move into the building in its condition, and no money to change the circumstances. I talked to several investors in the community who I knew owned projects elsewhere in downtown and other real estate. I said, hey, let's partner on this. We can bring funds to the table to get this done. They penciled out what the potential rents might be, not knowing who or might take over the space. They ran the numbers and ultimately said, thanks, but no thanks. So again, stuck. So I ran my own sort of pro forma, and at the same time as doing that, I was being approached by two different businesses who were saying, we would really like to have a brick and mortar presence in Estacada, but we have nowhere to go. Everything that's available is not really in a condition that we would need. The space doesn't suit our needs. What do you recommend? And I didn't have an answer other than this building that looked like it was going to fall down. So approached the city council with my pro forma. I'm not a real estate developer, but sometimes play one on TV. Had tried to capture all of the front end expenses, all the potential revenue that could be generated, how much subsidy might be needed, and made a best estimation at what the project would take. And to make a long story short, after several work sessions and a lot of deliberation, they decided to authorize me to consult and get our plan amended in order to identify this property as a piece of property to acquire by the Urban Renewal Agency. So we acquired the property, issued an RFP for architectural and construction services to just bring it into a vanilla shell state where it could be leased. And meanwhile, was talking to these two businesses that had interest in it. So again, abbreviating, the tenants that eventually moved in are called Yo Treats. They're a frozen yogurt shop. And they've done an excellent job of really making this place a community hub, a gathering place. They have a separate space that they purposely designed as part of their tenant improvement where they could host little birthday parties or graduation parties or whatever the instance is. But it's no cost to reserve, but it does, of course, create a revenue opportunity for them, smart thinking. And so it has really indeed become a focal point in downtown. Their marketing is good, their customer service is fantastic, it's clean, it's inviting, it's bright, and it's been a win for that business and for the community. Go ahead. Family owned, so this is not a chain that was trying to come and put in an establishment in Estacada. They were a local family who actually had relatives that had done something similar in Tillamook, and they used their business playbook in order to try and build something viable in Estacada, and they've been successful. Go ahead.
Were they one that had reached out to you previously, or did you go out and find somebody, or?
They were one of those businesses that were saying, we'd really like space, but nothing works for us. So this was an opportunity to kind of create a custom fit,
Yep.
as it were. So here you see the firefighters. They're in town enjoying themselves as well. And again, just trying to build some story here that it has become a community focal point. The secondary space in this building, which I haven't spoken about yet, this is Luke and Tanley. They're a couple in Estacada, and they started their business on the Clackamas River, literally on the Clackamas River in Estacada with a rack of kayaks and stand-up paddleboards, and would rent them out on an hourly basis. And they had grown that business successfully and said, we'd really like to have a brick and mortar presence in the city where we can sell gear, where it can be a gathering place, and bring that river tourism component more tangibly into the city. And that's exactly what they did. Their shop was 600 square feet, so not a lot of space to work with, but they made the most of it. As you can tell, there's a lot of stuff in there. And they've been successful as well. You can go ahead, one more slide. So much so that they outgrew that space, and because this Yo-Treats building was a success, was able to partner then where the city did not have to acquire the property itself, and instead just bring some grant funding in to rehabilitate a different building that they moved into for themselves exclusively, and this is about 1,500 square feet. And that's where they are today. It's on Zobrist, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a few years since I have been touching this project, but they're doing great at that location. Go ahead. There they are. Go ahead. People enjoying the river, or more accurately, Estacada Lake, which is the dammed river. So what are we talking about in terms of figures here? This is stale information, but you can look at the line items if you want. What I guess I'll bring you to is here, and it may be hard to see in the back. This says net subsidy from the Estacada Urban Renewal Agency. It's about $100,000. This project was completed in 2019, and then in 2020 something happened, pandemic, and that really changed these numbers in a couple of ways. One, we had intended to lease this building for 2 years, stabilize the tenants, and then sell the asset in order to bring those resources back into the Urban Renewal Agency. For better or worse, that timeline did not hold because of the pandemic. But what that meant for the agency is that rent revenue line item went up, actually. While we did decrease rent incrementally during the pandemic to ease that burden, it still created more rent revenue to the agency. And then, let's see, there was something else here. It's not coming to me right now. But the point is that that $100,000 figure actually came down a little bit below that mark over time. And so I'll conclude this piece by just saying this. Some people would be like, gosh, that's $100,000 of public dollars lost, right, where it was given away, essentially. In Estacada, Broadway Street was also fully rebuilt with a beautiful streetscape to the tune of about $2 million. Also a worthwhile investment, in my opinion. To Elaine's point, it did not directly increase the tax base. Indirectly, I would argue it did, but directly, no. This project, let's just round it at $100,000 and pretend that we could replicate that across downtown Estacada 20 times. Which would have more impact in that community? A new road, it does look beautiful, or 20 buildings that have been rehabilitated that now host businesses that in turn create that vibrancy and that sense of place that Sid mentioned. I would argue that this is perhaps an even better use of funding than those public infrastructure projects, although those are important too. So I'm proud of this project. It's been successful, and we're staying on the positive today. So
We are. Quick questions for you.
Yeah.
Is this your pro forma?
No.
Okay. Earned tax increment, 9503. Obviously, that's all the taxing districts that get a portion of that. And the subsidy is specifically from the Urban Renewal Agency, $102,000. So it's like 11-year payback, roughly, not taking in the 3% increase.
Right.
And what was the duration of this? So by the time the city bought the property, did the rehabilitation, got tenants in, and then sold it.
Yeah.
What was that hold period?
So it was supposed to be 2-year hold period initially. They sold the asset after I had left the position, but it was probably closer to the 4-year mark. Maybe not quite, but closer to the 4-year.
That's still impressive.
And thank you for the reminder. This is I think probably one of the best highlights of this story and this project is that the city, of course, has to sell an asset through a public process. We didn't know who might come forward and have the capital to purchase the project, but fortunately, the owners of Yo-Treats at that point had gotten them into a position to be able to make an offer on the property. So another shout out to another partner, Mount Hood Economic Alliance, funded their loan in order to allow Yo-Treats to buy their own building. So now they control their own real estate. They have secondary rent income from the other tenant next door in the same building, and they're in a really good spot. So and this is not going to Wall Street. This is all staying and circulating within Estacada. Do we want to talk about this now?
Yeah.
Let me tee it up really quickly,
Yes,
and then we'll
yes.
continue the conversation. So
Great.
here in Wilsonville, different set of challenges, different set of assets and dynamics in the community. If you've been to Wilsonville anytime recently, Town Center is the area in and around Safeway, where the old Fry's Electronics used to be, where the movie theater used to be. That whole area in the loop, Bullwinkle's Family Fun Center, this is all Town Center. There's a loop road. And so the area within and adjacent to that town center loop is what we call Town Center. There it is there. So you've got Safeway in this L-shaped development, Fry's up to the left, and the movie theater north of that. It's the land use vision that brought this built environment into reality is just unfortunately outdated. Big box retail with expansive parking lots and huge footprint buildings is just not relevant in 2025. And so we're seeing that. Fry's, of course, has been out of business for over 5 years now. And that's a topic in and of itself that we won't get into. But the vision for this area was established by the community after 2 years of really extensive public outreach, and that's a shout out to Wilsonville's planning staff. The city said, we don't actually have a downtown, and we would like one. And so the concept here, to really say it succinctly, is to create a main street that cuts north-south through this town center loop, and to build around that a real mixed-use district of multi-story buildings and filling in those parking lots, seeing the transition of this area into something that looks and functions a lot more like a downtown over time. This doesn't happen overnight. This is a 30 or 40-year vision, and it happens incrementally. Go ahead. There's the Fry's building. So when we talk about blight within the context of urban renewal, this is what blight looks like. Go ahead. And so this is an artist's rendition of what it might look and feel like at some point in the future. And the city feels that in order to facilitate and catalyze that type of development and investment, public investment is going to need to be brought in alongside private investment, and that's where urban renewal comes in. I'll leave it
Thank
at
you.
that. Yeah.
Perfect. Will, you're up.
Actually, can I control the clicker so I can use the laser? Thank you. So, yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about our waterfront district, which helped connect our city to the river. And so Seth thought that could have some analogs here in Oregon City. How many folks have spent time on our waterfront? Good. That kind of helps me know how much to kind of describe it. But this is probably nothing like you remember. This was 2006. The area was half empty. It was a bunch of legacy businesses who had been there for quite a long time, and then our wastewater treatment plant over on the side. This was all fill dirt from creation of the dams, and it separated Hood River's downtown, which used to be on the riverfront before the railroad and the interstate. And I should say, this is the graph that I'm going to show how tax increment changed through the life cycle of this district. Really wanted to, that graph, when Elaine shows it, says, oh, it looks like, yeah, that's great. I would love if it worked out like that, but I'm sure that's fanciful and it doesn't really grow that much. And so I wanted to show with real numbers how we did experience that in Hood River. So this is looking east down Portway Avenue, the road that goes along the river, and how empty, and shows how empty it was. Mostly parking for semi trucks. It was so empty on the weekends that people would hold bike races. and on summer months, the odor from our wastewater treatment plant was so bad you could barely stand to be in this area. So we passed urban renewal with a plan to start addressing these issues. And so passed it with $11.9 million was our frozen base. And we got to work, one, addressing the odor control issues at the wastewater treatment plant. And that really goes into that discussion about indirect investments that don't directly create any taxable value, but in our case, you can really see how clearly no development was going to happen until we addressed how smelly it was, frankly, on our waterfront. Also built a new road, which increased the amount of developable land. And the Port of Hood River came in and built a spec building, kind of with the confidence that was generated from the city taking on an urban renewal plan and committing to development of this area, gave confidence to the port to go out on a limb and build a building without having a tenant. And that ended up housing Freem, which is now one of our most popular breweries in the city. So moving on, this is now 2012. You've got the building where Freem is coming in. And the success of that development really broke the dam wide open on private investment that followed. You can see starting to come in down the road there. So we had headquarters for Dakine. Tofurkey expanded and added a bunch of offices. Then just an office building was built. And Hood Tech, which is in aerospace, all came in and just was like a flood of development right after those initial urban renewal investments. And that's kind of how things went with a lot of development. But I wanted to zero in also on this really unique case that is not just us building infrastructure or a road or doing public investments, but where urban renewal got directly involved in a development deal that brought a branded hotel to our waterfront. So this developer wanted to build a hotel and was getting a lot of pushback, a lot of public opposition to the development. And through a deal facilitated by Urban Renewal, the city purchased this land from the developer, which is an old shipyard, and brought it into public ownership and started a restoration process. And we purchased this from the developer of the hotel. So the hotel owned both properties, and we borrowed the money to buy the passive park by borrowing from the developer. So if you think about that, no cash traded hands. We just got an interest-free loan from the developer to buy land that they owned. And getting this new passive park was kind of what created enough of a win for all parties involved that this development moved forward. And then we paid off that loan that purchased the new park by the tax increment directly generated by that hotel. So the hotel owner every year would send me his tax bill, highlight on it how much of it went to urban renewal, and then I'd cut him a check for exactly that amount until we paid off that land. And so that's an instance where this park truly was paid off 100% by new taxable value and no other source. So in addition to that new property tax, this new hotel is also one of our biggest sources of transient lodging tax now too. So development continues to happen. And now this is what it looks like when you're looking down Portway. Vibrant, probably how you all know it. On sunny days, it's packed, and it's a new revitalized amenity and asset to the city, but it's also increased taxable value by about $80 million, where growth had been stagnant in that area. Over this roughly 15-year period, property tax growth increased at a 15% compounded annual rate. And when this closes, which is very close to close, be about $1 million additional dollars in tax revenue going to the general tax rolls. Yeah, so that was our experience in Hood River. think that's, yeah.
That hotel structure? Yes. I'll wait until everybody finishes talking. The hotel deal structure is fairly unique. Who was behind that?
Yeah, so I wish I could take credit for that, but credit goes to our mayor at the time, Arthur Babbitts, and then also Steve Wheeler was our city manager, and they crafted that up. And it's really kind of expanded my thinking about ways to use urban renewal.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right, Sid.
I have something to say about Hood River first. If you go, there's a Sunshine Pizza, and you want a dried cherry pizza from them. And there's also a great gelato cart down on the waterfront.
All very true.
All right, so can I have the clicker also?
Yes.
I might need the pointer. Is this the, yeah. So I always like to start, again, this is kind of the softer version of urban renewal, but I'm a self-described spirited visionary and eternal optimist, because if you do redevelopment projects, you have to be an eternal optimist. You also have to have that vision in mind to be able to bring a community together and help them create the vision for themselves, but you also have to have that creativity and begin to start with kind of what's your vision for it as well, and then translate it to the community's vision. So there's a couple questions that Seth had asked was, what's your favorite project that you did in Lake Oswego, or for me? And I don't have a favorite project.
You sure about that?
I'm sorry. Actually, yeah, the Windward was an awesome project, yes. And so to me, it's like I'm going to use the football analogy with the playoffs. It's like you have to consider the full body of work of Lake Oswego, and that's what it is. It's a composition of a whole bunch of different projects in Lake Oswego, and it's a process. And that's why in 2003, I put together a kind of timeline of different projects in Lake Oswego for our East End Redevelopment District as well as our Lake Grove. So this is on, I think, the city's website for Redevelopment Agency, and you could get into the details, but this really started off in 1979, 1980 with the vision, a Blue Ribbon Committee that really created what's the vision for this downtown, what's it gonna look like? And then here in 2024 is kind of the North Anchor project, but it's a process. It was a 45-year process, and some of the things that I learned and want to pass on is you got to begin with the end in mind, and I know people say that a lot, but it's really going back to that initial vision that was created by the Blue Ribbon Committee is if you ever get into conflicts or controversy or kind of not knowing what direction you want to go to, that was something that I went to a lot and said, what did the people really want originally? And urban renewal plans are living documents, so yes, they can change over time, but if you can really kind of continue to meet the intent of what that was, one, you keep that integrity with the public trust, and then you implement the vision for it. The second is seek like-minded partners, and that's probably one of the biggest things is when the rubber meets the road, you want to know that your developer is going to stand behind your community. And a lot of the projects we did in Lake Oswego were public-private partnerships. We had a skin in the game as well as a developer. And I think that's probably one of the best ways to do it because then you're both putting your 110% in a process. And then lastly, it's the political will and consistency over this 45-year process. And I want to acknowledge all of the mayors, council members, city managers, and other city staff that worked on all of these projects long before that I got there. They're the ones who created the path that we were on. I was fortunate enough to be able to work on some of these big projects, Millennium Plaza Park, the Windward City Hall project, North Anchor, Lakeview Village. So I got to reap a lot of those benefits. But the story here is it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. Increment takes time to develop. And I'm just going to point out some of the an example of that is Lakeview Village. That was constructed in 2023. It took 10 years to get to that point, going back and forth, multiple developers. But ultimately, it was kind of the catalyst project for our downtown, in addition to Millennium Plaza Park, which was the community's living room, and that really kind of started the character in building what Lake Oswego was. A lot of the other things that aren't listed on here is a lot of the facade grant that we gave to different businesses, streetscape improvement projects. All of those things created kind of the context and the community character. Lakeview Village, it was a 10-year project. The Windward, I don't want to bring up bad memories, but so I got there in 2000. They were talking about, Mr. Weiser was talking about redeveloping that site. And we're like, all right, it's going to happen this year. Well, it finally got a little traction with some help from our developer friends, but that was a project that went all the way to Oregon Supreme Court as appealed by the community. And so here's a lesson for this is, I'll go back to the same people for Lakeview Village as well as the Windward, and I ask them, can you imagine Lake Oswego without these developments? And they're like, absolutely not. We can't. There's fear and change in a community, and it's part of our work is change management. Again, visualizing what is this community's vision? How do you want to see it? What's the quality of life? This is kind of the story that tells Lake Oswego's story in that transition. So the next slide is, and this is, I like to call this slide hang in there, because it kind of goes back to, again, this is the Lake Grove Urban Renewal Plan that was created in 2012. The planning for that community planning started back in 2003 through 2008. And I did a tour of the improvements here with some of the Westland Council members that I see here. And one of the cool things is that even though these things do take time, but they do come to fruition. And the Lake Grove Village Center Plan in 2008, this was part of the vision statement, and it said by the year 2024. I mean, to be able to go from that planning process and to really reflect, I think, accurately what that vision was. Again, you're delivering on what you promised through urban renewal, and again, continuing with that community trust. But again, this is a great transition from what it used to be to what it is now. And I think that was my last slide. Yep.
So when did you originally go to Lake Oswego?
In 2000 for long-range planning, and then I transitioned to redevelopment agency in 2008.
So you spent 24 years there?
24 years.
Working on urban renewal to some degree?
Long-range planning, urban renewal. Yeah, urban renewal is a big part of it, yeah.
What was the political support you had? That was one of the things that you had up there. Was that pretty consistent over those 24 years?
It really was, even through the times when the political composition kind of swung back to maybe a little more fiscally conservative, to where it was more kind of what's our city core services. But even through that process, it was still, urban renewal was very important to the community, because we could look back on the successes that we had and how we were using urban renewal effectively, and how it was improving the quality of life and placemaking.
Okay, I interrupted the applause for Sid.
Oh.
Okay, so hopefully everybody knows the blue cards on your table, those are for questions. Part of the benefit of being the moderator, I get to do the first questions off the bat for each person, and they do know what's coming, so yeah, that kind of gives away the first one for Elaine. But Elaine, working in Wilsonville and the Dalles, I see your name everywhere with the Urban Renewal Agencies. Excluding the group represented next to you, what is your favorite program or project in the state of Oregon, and why?
So obviously this is a really tough question, because I've worked in so many places, but if people ask me, what's a great little city to visit in Oregon, I'll tell them, go to Astoria. Go to the Liberty Theater, which was funded in part by the restoration by Urban Renewal, matched to other local donations and to historic donations. I would recommend staying across the street in the hotel next to the Liberty Theater, which was not funded by Urban Renewal, but when the Liberty Theater got restored, it invested over $2 million into restoring itself, so an offshoot of that public investment. I would then go up to the Blue Scorcher Bakery, which is in the Fort George Brewery, which is an urban renewal project funded both through local, I mean, they really packaged everything together to get that funding going, but there are 6 little businesses within the Fort George Brewery and an associated block, all owned by one business owner. At the Blue Scorcher Bakery, I would get one of their chocolate cupcakes. Then I would go down to the Garden of Surging Waves, which was partially funded again by Urban Renewal, but this was funded, this is a commemoration of Asian working in all of the different seafood canneries in Astoria. It was funded about half through donations from different Asian communities who wanted to see this recognition of their contribution to Astoria. The Fort George Brewery is in, and similar to Matt's example, it was an old windows broken auto shop that used to have, not shop, auto dealership, that used to have all of their cars indoors, and it went out of business. The building was totally in disrepair, broken buildings. When I first started in Astoria in 2005, working with them, I met with a city manager. On my way there, I was looking at their information. Over half of their area in the downtown was owned by nonprofits. And I thought, how in the world are we going to make this area work? Because there isn't that huge base to grow. And we worked by improving those existing buildings, by improving the atmosphere, and this goes back to what Sid says, is create an environment. Create someplace people want to go. If builders, investors, store owners see that people want to go there already, they are going to invest there too. So Astoria is a great subject. I have one little comment to make about Lake Oswego because I worked on both of those plans. On the Lake Grove Village plan, at that point, their city council was a little split on whether or not to use urban renewal funding for that Boone's Ferry Road. And their compromise was they would set up the urban renewal district, but it would really only work if a GO bond was passed to pay for a portion of that road. And if that GO bond did not get passed, then they would not use the urban renewal. So there were a couple of those councilors who were betting on that GO bond not passing. And the business community did an incredible job of going out and lobbying to get that GO bond passed, and it indeed did pass, and that project, as Sid said, did get built. So it was a great way to compromise and to say, okay, if the community's behind this, we'll use it.
So you said 2005. So what's represented here is a less than 20-year?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I could have hope that if something started today, I could see it before I died. Okay, terrific. Just want to confirm that. All right, Matt, I've been waiting a long time to ask you this question. So Wilsonville, amazing urban renewal history, right? Positive development, assessed values going up, all good things. You had an advisory vote, and that advisory vote failed after the city, and you specifically, had done a tremendous amount of outreach. Like, I was impressed by how much you guys had done. I thought it was a no-brainer. And then this advisory vote fails. What do you think happened, and really what's next? And yes, I will give you the clicker.
I actually don't know if I need it. You can maintain control.
Okay, yeah.
The takeaway here, if you do some quick mental math, is that the measure lost by 54 votes. Not like 54% to 46%, but 54 votes. So the community was divided on this topic. Seth, you asked what happened. It's always difficult to know exactly what happened, but I will tell you a couple of things that I believe influenced this outcome. During this same cycle, on this same ballot, there appeared two other measures for voters to consider, and they both dealt with term limits for the Wilsonville City Council. Those measures would have allowed a couple of the councilors, because of the way the language was written and the way it had been interpreted historically, it had set a precedent for how that interpretation would affect the tenure of city councilors. It was vague, it did need to be cleaned up. In my view, there was nothing nefarious going on here. This was not a power grab. It was a good faith effort to clean up language and make it, make the tenure abilities of office holders, it would make sense. So, sorry, I digress, but the point is, like, with the way it was currently written and the way it had been interpreted, someone that had been in office for mere days, that could count as a full year of being in office. And that wasn't necessarily the original intent, but that's how it was being applied, and so it was cleaning that up. The impact, nonetheless, that was easy to grab onto was this is people in power that want to stay in power. Fair enough, but those folks that were rallying against this term limit measure brought urban renewal alongside it and said no on this measure, this measure, this measure in all of their campaign efforts. I believe that could have made the difference between 54 votes and 55 votes, but that's speculative. The other thing that I would just say is, I'm biased in my opinion, Seth, but I feel like we did a fairly decent job at getting the word out as well. But there's always room for improvement, and I think that there's room for improvement. There were areas that could have been more clear. The language in the measure itself and the explanatory statement could have been different. I don't know about better, but could have been different. And that may have changed the way people thought about things as well. What perhaps wasn't clear is that if urban renewal were not the mechanism utilized, the town center plan vision doesn't happen. And that perhaps is what people really need to consider when they put that ballot in the drop box.
If you were going to concisely state lessons learned, if somebody in this room was leading an effort towards a ballot measure, you can't really control what else is on the ballot measure, right?
Yeah.
So are there any lessons learned from that you would pass on?
Yeah, so because Wilsonville has had four other urban renewal districts in its past that have all been successful at the ballot box, there was some assumption going on into this that Wilsonville believes in urban renewal, this one is going to pass too. We put it on a cycle that we thought would be low turnout, and it was, but that ended up really giving a disproportionate amount of influence to a certain segment of people in the community. So put it on a cycle, on a ballot, where there's going to be a large turnout. And the reason for that is not manipulative. It's so that you really do get a true representation of the voices in the community and not just a small subset. So that's definitely a lesson learned.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Will, I think we have single slides now.
Single slides, yeah.
For any of the local municipalities looking to potentially do a riverfront development, Most important considerations.
Yeah. So for this question, I really wanted to zero in on just the guts and the entrepreneurial thinking that went into the first investment in the waterfront district. We knew that there was a huge potential value in adjacency to the Columbia River. And I think it's probably similar here in Oregon City. You know how much potential, connecting to the waterfall and just all the potential that is there. But someone had to take the first move. And so in 2010, just draw everyone back to kind of what it was like in that year with the depth of the Great Recession, financial markets seizing up, and just really no one being in the mood to invest. And the guts it took for the Port of Hood River to go in there and build a spec building before they even had a tenant. And I think that kind of speaks into the, if you build it, they will come mindset that you kind of need to have, or if you do have, will really supercharge your urban renewal district if you know you have something and you're positive and confident about its value. Seeking out those folks who are open to take the risk in investing and thinking really about what is that one sort of needle that's going to break the camel's back and really catalyze everything that's just being held, waiting to take advantage of that potential. Yeah.
How do you go about, so what I'm hearing is none of this is accomplished without a partnership with the private sector.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have to look for allies. Think about so it's the reason why I love urban renewal so much is because it really does. It's really one of the only ways you can think entrepreneurially and really be the carrot instead of the stick. Going back to my introduction, and thinking about from a developer's perspective or the private capital, private markets, what are they thinking about when they're looking at this urban renewal district, and what is something that what is the barrier that you can alleviate and take out of the way to have then the dominoes start to fall. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Sid, one for you.
Before you go to the next slide, can I ask a quick question of the audience? When you think of Tualatin, where do you think the downtown is? Any thoughts? Or how many people think they know where the downtown is? 2, 3. Okay, I have a lot of work to do. Go ahead. So I'm calling this Tualatin 2.0, and one of the most frequent questions that I get is, why would I leave Lake Oswego after 25 years? There was still a lot of work to be there, and the last project I was working on was the North Anchor project. It was a mixed-use boutique hotel, multifamily, ground floor retail. It's going to be about an $85 million project. City was contributing as part of that. I really wanted to see that project break ground, but at the same time, there was this great opportunity at City of Tualatin, and what drew me to Tualatin was the potential that it has, untapped potential, and you've heard a lot people here talk about potential, and that is urban renewal. That is kind of for me, that's kind of what drives me in doing projects. And so Tualatin 2.0, there was an urban renewal district in downtown Tualatin. Generally, with that kind of red outline, that's our central design district in Tualatin. This is I-5 here, Tualatin, Sherwood Road, Boone's Ferry. So you've got your landmarks, Fred Meyer, Bass Pro Shop, Bridgeport is a little further north than the Tualatin River. But there was a urban renewal district at some point, and that's what created what's called the Tualatin Commons, the 3-acre water feature in the downtown. But what got me excited about going to Tualatin was they passed an urban renewal district plan in 2022. It's projecting $140 million worth of investment in the whole urban renewal area, which is about 450 acres, so it's much more expansive and then kind of this 30-acre area. But to me, that was a sign from the city that, say, this community is serious about redeveloping their downtown area. And so that coupled with this red area along the Tualatin River is a 6-acre parcel that the city just purchased. And that, to me, is a catalyst project. I see Tualatin today where Lake Oswego was 25 years ago with creation of Millennium Plaza Park. Again, Millennium Plaza Park created the character of the downtown where it grew from that. It created kind of the branding for the community, live, work, and play. And to me, Tualatin, the 6-acre park is our riverfront project that we're going to be working on over the next several years. The other great asset of Tualatin is that there's a retail market there. And there's a hunger for that. We've got Bass Pro Shop that's moved in there. We've got Bridgeport Village. There's a retail market there. But for me, it's for this downtown. How do we create more of an experiential shopping, which is kind of what downtown Lake Oswego is. It weathers a lot of the recessions a lot more. It weathers online shopping a lot more because people go there not just to shop, but it's to experience that downtown, shop at a mom and pop store. And kind of the vision that I have as I was looking at the downtown is, this is such a great urban core to start from. How do you connect really one of the biggest assets, which is Community Park, the Tualatin River, the trail access, Riverfront Park? How do you connect these two? How do you create those synergies between the park and the downtown? And then from that, how do you then expand on that success and really kind of begin to rethink the areas around it, from the classic kind of shopping center model. But the plan is, it's a 2-year plan. We've just started the 5-year. There's 3 different processes that we're looking at. The first is community identity. We're partnering with Michelle Reeves, who's done a lot of work. She owns Civilis. She's helping us go through a 5-month process to create the community identity placemaking. Again, going back to really what's kind of the heart and soul of this community. From that, we're going to partner with the University of Oregon with the architecture, design, and studio to do a design charrette for different areas in the downtown area. One of the biggest challenges, I think, for people is really seeing, okay, how do you translate what your identity and vision is? And the U of O architecture program will do that. It'll take what we take out of this 5-month process, put that into 10 to 15 different design concepts for the downtown area. And then lastly, in early 2027, we're going to be looking at code amendments, creating design standards for our downtown. We have design standards, but they're more suggestions as opposed to actual code-related things. And I think one of the things that we as a city and community can do to attract developers and reinvestment in the downtown is create certainty. So that certainty comes with creating a code where there's an expectation and there's, so developers can understand what is the expectation. The other is reducing risk. And to me, as part of that code development, but reducing that risk is also creating those partnerships, public-private partnerships with developers. And so the end goal of this whole 2-year process is to create the conditions where there is more reinvestment and more interest. And part of my job right now is kind of going out and kind of spreading that word about Tualatin that in 2 years, we're open for business now, but in 2 years, we're really going to be in a position where we're going to aggressively look for partnerships.
You got another 20 years in you?
We'll see.
Okay, so everybody heard that we were being very positive today, yes? These cards are brutal. All right, let's see if I can find some that are appropriate. So, Will, one for you. How extensive was cleanup for the waterfront project, and who participated? Funding source type, et cetera.
So You're talking about like DEQ, brownfield remediation?
That's how, yeah.
Yeah.
I read it.
Okay, yeah. So it was fill dirt that was created by the creation of the dams. So it was all development ready and didn't need, it was, greenfield development. I'd say the passive park that we bought, that was a shipyard, and part of buying it has been doing native plantings, but we're mostly just letting nature do its work.
So that's the only appropriate question here. All right, so I'm going to expand upon one of these. One of the perceived drawbacks of tax increment financing is you are freezing the base. So you're diverting funds away from other underlying taxing districts. So people will say, my services from these underlying districts are being impacted, or they have to go out for a bond, a levy, increasing the property taxes if it's approved, right? How, and this is for all of you, any of you can respond. How do you counter that argument?
Yeah, I'll take a first stab. One, you can't totally counter it. Some folks are just not going to like urban renewal, and you're not going to change their minds. So there's that. But how I communicate to overlapping districts is, one, talk about the successes, show it how it has worked in the past, show how it has been a positive return on investment and how they have more money now than they would have had otherwise. And that's what I do. And really emphasize that I do see urban renewal as having a fiduciary responsibility, not just to the city, but also to all the overlapping districts, and just really communicate that that's intrinsic into my mindset and how we're going to operate.
I think that's a great answer. I see a couple taxing districts represented in the room, and I think we would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge that urban renewal is a literal co-investment, partnered investment into an area or into a community. And so it's important to establish that partnership formally and informally with those taxing districts, to include them in the plan formation process, to get their buy-in, to make sure that they're behind the vision as well. And again, it may not be possible to bring everyone under the umbrella. That's an important acknowledgement, but let's bring in as many as we can and make sure that the plan and the financial modeling that's in that plan is aligned with, and the taxing districts can get excited about it too, to the extent possible. The other thing that we can point to, and this is getting to the technical side of things, it's not represented on that pretty graph, but there's something required by Oregon statute called revenue sharing. And revenue sharing says to urban renewal agencies that when you're starting to really collect increment because your plan has been successful, it's time to start sharing that tax increment with the taxing districts. And so it mandates that before the plan sunsets, the urban renewal agency has to start giving a little, I don't want to use say kicker, but it's new revenues to those taxing districts that they didn't have, and they get that even in advance of the plan sunsetting. In Wilsonville, they accomplished that in a couple of ways. Before that was required by statute, there was a time when it wasn't. Wilsonville had the practice of reducing the size of its boundary in order to release the tax revenue associated with certain high-value properties out of the urban renewal area so that they would go back onto the tax rolls before the plan sunsetted. So that's one way to go about it. Now that statute requires it, the city can elect to under-levy, so basically to say if there's $9 million of increment available each year, we're only going to certify $5 million of it. And so that $4 million balance of increment then goes to the taxing districts without having to amend the boundary. It's administratively easier. But yeah, partnerships and revenue sharing, really critical to sharing in the wealth.
Yeah, a lot more questions?
Appropriate questions? We've got only a couple of minutes left. So how important is land property acquisition? Can you have a successful urban renewal plan without purchasing property?
I suspect you can. However, if you want to accelerate a project, and again, it goes back to reducing risks and providing some certainty and having skin in the game, being able to consolidate land, which is kind of the process that we used in Lake Oswego, is hugely important for a couple things. One, developers aren't going to necessarily want to land bank and hold a vacant piece of property that has no return on the investment. Whereas, on the other hand, the city may have, the urban renewal may have that opportunity to be able to do that. That's what we did with our North Anchor project. We've been holding that 1 acre consolidated parcel for probably 10, 15 years now. And so it is hugely important to be able to create enough land where it will be a good investment and a lower-ish risk investment for a developer. So yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to add to that because many times an urban renewal agency or city council will have an idea of how they want their area to develop. If they don't have control of a piece of property, that can get developed into something that really isn't what they want to happen there. And I will spare my friend here from having to address this, but on the former Fry's site in Wilsonville, you can either develop that into a mixed-use, wonderful property that will help to do the vision for what could happen there, or it can be developed into a big box store. That, yes, maybe that serves the community, but it certainly doesn't help provide the vision for developing a downtown city center. And you can help make sure that that property develops the correct way by acquiring it, then reselling it with the provision that it gets developed into the type of use that you want for your community.
Is there any reason for an urban renewal agency, hypothetically speaking, to hold a property for, say, 20 years off the tax rolls?
No, I mean, the goal would be to turn that property over as soon as possible, get it back on the tax rolls. However, there's a couple things. If you start purchasing, if you have the ability to purchase land early on, you're going to get that at a great price, right? A much lower price. As the area in your downtown or wherever, your urban renewal area starts to redevelop, those land values are going to increase. You can then use whatever land you've banked as part of your process and your disposition and development with a developer as part of your offering with a request for proposal, et cetera. So it certainly reduces that initial upfront capital cost in the pro forma for developers to be able to help reduce that land cost.
I would just make a really fast note to say that there are some instances where property may be purchased and then written down to like a $1 value in order to make a project feasible. But I think in most cases, ideally, that write-down would be much less significant. And so in the case of the little Yo Treats project that I showed you, the total project cost was about $400,000, but the agency recouped about $300,000 of that. And that $300,000 can be redeployed into other projects and effectively recycled without counting against the maximum indebtedness further. And so are there instances where, I mean, ideally an agency would not hold property that long, but are there circumstances that might make it make sense? I think yes, but in an ideal scenario, when a city acquires property, programs it, sells it back for private development, they're going to recoup some of that and be able to invest it again.
Estacada, 4 years.
For the whole period?
The example you showed.
Yes.
Okay.
Less than that, I believe.
Yeah.
I'd need to go back and look.
It is almost 1 o'clock or just past it. Just want to say thank you to everybody being here today. Hopefully you learned something, and let's give a huge round of applause for our panelists.
All right, and thank you. Whoop, hold still there. Thank you, Seth, for being an excellent moderator today. Those questions weren't that brutal. I thought those were kind of easy peasy softballs, but it was good information, and that's the main reason why we conduct these forums every month, is to provide you timely and accurate information from panelists that have deep backgrounds in some of these very complicated subjects. So I just want to have a raise of hands from everyone here that came in with one feeling about tax increment financing or urban renewal, and after hearing the speakers and watching the slides, now have a different position or attitude towards TIF, tax increment financing. All right, better understanding. How many people still believe that urban renewal is a tax? How many people would recommend municipalities use urban renewal as a financial resource to stimulate business and economic development? All right, well, we're moving in the right direction, so that's a good thing. With that being said, again, I want to thank Seth's company, Level 1, for sponsoring today's forum. I'm going to bring Dan Fowler, the owner of the Abernathy Center, up for a few moments. Next month's forum is going to be bringing you up to date on the Carrying Place facility that was the old Miles Fiberglass building just a few blocks from here. They're going to be talking about where they've been, where they're at, but most importantly, where they're going. So here's Dan.
Thanks, Kent. Yeah, I don't have too much to add other than it'll be the fourth Tuesday of next month. We will have some of our tenants that are going to be occupying the building here, so you'll learn about what's going to happen on the inside. We'll be showing you what's happening on the outside also. We've got nearly completed architectural drawings. Our plan is to have those submitted to the city by the end of June for a building permit. So major update on the Carrying Place, a needed facility to house our nonprofit service providers working in the homeless community. So hope you can show up. Thanks.
Dan, it's not a hope, they will show up. No, it's a great facility that Dan is very heavily engaged with, and I think everyone in the community will be very excited and pleased with what it's going to offer as resources for the people that need those type of services. So with that being said, I understand it's going to be quite warm this week, so get outside and enjoy, water your gardens, and we will see you next month. Take care.